Well, ar an gydal sias mar utron her yn Quim Siaws ar an ffyrgyn fwtio ar y roedd gyleir ar an law special to shop. Law tofog da Oibre ar ffwt o dal. Law fi tofog da cygwrsi starin nam. Agus law tofog da ffos. Das iad sanna tof e gofod con cartan an dynn cartan an Oibre ilio a bwyntamach. I'm so pleased to welcome as President of Ireland, to welcome you all here this afternoon. And I have to say, I couldn't think of a finer group of people to welcome on a very special day, May Day, when, as I have just said, in Irish, workers all over the world are celebrating a day that is special to the right to work, rights at work, and right of workers to contribute to the forming of a society that is equal and participatory and just. It gives me great pleasure to see so many young people, of course, to say a word about, and to see also so many of you wearing the Sustainable Development Badge, which, of course, one of the great projects we speak about so often here now in Ors and Outram. I should say as well that Sabina Higgins, she's detained in Galway with something that was simply unavoidable of a family kind, and Sabina and I both ended up in the same union indirectly. But my first union was the ESBOA, the ESBOA Association, and then later I founded the teaching section of the Workers' Union of Ireland, and that became absorbed in the SITU. And of course Sabina had been in Actors' Equity, which was in the Transport Union. So we have in fact made a journey. We are both members, still members of that very large unit. I'm so pleased as well, you'll excuse me if I say that when I was speaking down in Killarney to that magnificent evening we had when the unions came together to form FORSA, and I had the pleasure yesterday of meeting the President of FORSA. But all of you working in your different organisations for trade union rights, equality rights, gender rights, rights in relation to expression, rights in relation to sexuality, rights in relation to participation, you're all very, very welcome. I think yesterday it was, we had people visiting me who were the centenary of the Limerick Soviet, as it was, and I think it's very, very important that we remember all those who have marched and fought and stood in solidarity with their colleagues, with their fellow citizens, and with people all over the world who, as I said, have struggled against inequality and against so many forms of exclusion. I think as well what is very challenging for me is that people of my age, with the recollection of marching behind banners on Saturday, as I said, listening to the feet, it was a most extraordinary experience, and this is something I just thought I would say. I remember very, very much in marches both against apartheid and marches against war, marches against all different rights that we've had, different workers' rights. There were people who would come somewhat shyly in many cases, and they'd begin walking behind the banners, and by the end of the march, and having listened to the speeches, they would have, in fact, they'd be with you then for the future and for the struggle. And I sometimes think it is one of the great challenges of the present atmosphere when you have so much the privatised experience of technology and communications, that while you can actually organise events faster by spreading the information, you do have to really work hard to retain in present conditions that powerful sense of the collective, the songs, the banners and so forth and so on. It is a time, I think, so today is a day when we remember all of those who have marched, fought for and stood in solidarity with their colleagues, their fellow citizens, and with people all over the world who have struggled against inequality and against any form of exclusion. But it's inspiring, I have to say, and a great source of hope in the very best sense, as I look around the room and see so many young people gathered here who have already taken up or are willing to take up the new challenges with the same commitment and courage as those who have given us their legacy, the fine and generous tradition within democracy that is trade unionism. So many of the rights that liberal people take for granted are in fact rights that were won by trade unionists. The promotion of a more inclusive society must be a cornerstone of any true democracy, and a society that is truly equal is one that recognises the fundamental dignity of each and every member and the valuable contribution that workers make in their many diverse ways, so that we can all make in strengthening and supporting the society of which we are a part. So today, when Sabina and I decided to have on this particular May Day to invite those who are the new young activists to come to be with us, it was because we knew that they will be contributing in a meaningful way to a national conversation that we so need, and how we can achieve enhanced participation and transformation within Irish society. And that was one of the three pillars in my decision to stand for re-election. And I hope as well that your coming together will ignite debate amongst you on the future shape of our workplaces and of the wider culture in which they will operate. Because as young people, your voice is critical to such a debate. I think it is incredibly important as well that in many, many cases that the debate about work becomes a debate about reduction in unemployment figures. It is about much more than that. It is about how, in fact, what will be the definition of work into the new society which is being created. And your vision and your creative energy and your capacity to imagine a better world will be vital forces in navigating a way forward towards achieving a society that is ethical, just, respectful of all its members, and genuinely entitled to claim the status of a democracy. Sometimes, as I say, these words, people think, is there something abstract about all of this? There isn't at all. A person who is being exploited knows that they're being exploited. It's an experience, and most people who are involved in organising workers know what it is decent work and what is dignified work. But even more important, and the biggest challenge is going to be, in fact, actually, defining work. For example, many people here are involved in caring in different ways. So, where does there's a new book by Kukowski on 1,000 years of history of the concept of work. For example, the people who hired servants were people often who said that it would be undignified to be working, but it was all right if you could pay someone else to do the essential tasks. How work is defined, how will work be defined in the future? And why is caring taken so differently from other forms of trade activities? You're going to win all those debates, and that's what's going to be very, very important. I think, as a society that denies these values or doesn't allow such debate, it has to be opposed, because a society that denies values is not either inevitable or incapable of being changed or replaced by the efforts of those who want democracy vindicated and deepened. It's a long journey, but it's one that I know that all of your efforts can shorten for your fellow workers. I remember when I established, and this was most encouraging, 7 or 8 years ago, when I established the Being Young and Irish initiative, and some of the people are here. It was to listen to the views, and I encountered 800 young people, and their ideas of what do they want from Ireland. And those who participated emphasised the importance to them of solidarity, equality, inclusion, pluralism, freedom of thought, expression, the right to use the Irish language. And what was very, very, very interested in another consultation I did is that all of the young people wanted a dignified, decent society for older people, and older people wanted a decent society for younger people. And later on in speeches over the following 7 years, I emphasised that it was one of the greatest resources we had in Ireland, that we didn't have an intergenerational conflict like that, and that we had a great, great capacity if we built on it. And building on that, I went on then to initiate the President's Ethics Initiative as a deliberative process which could map out the issues that need to be addressed and the types of changes that it needed to occur in pursuits of that better Ireland. I often think about that. That was through some of the most vicious attacks on one of my speeches, I remember, during the period we had the launch of the Ethics Initiative. People said the President quoted left-wing economists and maverick economists. He was referring to Mirowski and people like that. But what was very interesting is I saw in that, and it is much stronger now, a very deliberate attempt to prevent discursive economics in the area of economics. Looking back on it in the 8 years, I can unequivocally state that the hardest issue I've had to deal with is in fact getting space to discuss economics. It is that the notion that you can in fact keep people consuming, keep them separate from you, sell the idea that they're looking to a job, that they're looking at conditions of change over which no one can control, to be still working. So this is why all economic models must be made to state their assumptions, and workers must empower themselves with economics and fiscal knowledge to be able to demand the right to compare models. I think that ethics an issue was something else, which I won't delay it now, but there's a big difference between an ethics that is talking about as Polanyi would once say, economics is about meeting the needs of societies. It was very, very much, but an ethical version of the economy is very different from saying an ethics is making sure you don't get caught, that you have a paper trail and so forth. So it was a necessary debate. But we're now at a further, more important phase yet, where ideas and concepts must be harnessed. And it's one of the reasons I sought a second term, was to be able to take the next steps towards delivering real action if we're about to bring about real transformation. And if we are to construct together a society that will be inclusive, equal and shaped to accommodate and cherish all its citizens in all of their circumstances and all of their vulnerabilities. I keep defining societies and a republic as a community of vulnerabilities. And young people and their active participation will be integral to the writing of the next chapter of our nation's story. Already there's been very reassuring evidence that there is on this island a real will amongst young citizens to achieve equality and to become consciously involved in directing change, both at home and across our wider global society. So pleased to welcome here people who have defended the right to have student newspapers, and very particularly the secondary schools who have organised, which is just a brilliant development. And earlier this year, Irish school children raised their voices in union with teenagers across the world to protest inaction on climate change, inspired by 15-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who has now become nominated, of course, for a Nobel Peace Prize. But your work will require courage. All of that does require courage, something I feel that you have in abundance. And a few short days ago, I had an experience of great courage. I joined many hundreds of other borders at the funeral of 29-year-old Ira McKee in Belfast. And I'm so pleased to welcome so many members in the NUJ, North and South, who are here this afternoon. And while mourning her tragic death, we were also celebrating the life of a young woman whose legacy will always be a profound one. A woman who, in the words of her friend, embodied a future of finding commonality, enjoying difference in others. And what she's left as part of her legacy is the reminder that the gift of courage is the greatest gift. So I think achieving equality too must never be misunderstood as being about the creation of opportunities for the individual at the expense of collective and universalist rights. That is the fundamental difference between a liberal and a republican version of rights. I see a misprint of my speech. So often it is those who are most vulnerable and marginalised who are excluded from discussion, participation and decision making, and denied the voice that will allow their needs to be recognised in the formation of social policies. So equal weight must be given to both the integrity of the individual and the integrity of the community. It's something I have to say that should be really taken up about that different version of liberal rights and republican rights. And the third version is the one that Habermas speaks about the necessary elements of a deliberative democracy. In liberal rights very much are defined against the state. The idea is you're keeping the state away from your collective individual rights. It's exclusionary. It is also, by the way, that which has left us the legacy of all the problems in the European Union at the present time. On the other hand, republican version of rights is one in which there is in fact a set of needs in the collective that have in fact actually the policies should be directed towards meeting, and you get an entirely different version of rights. And this is the debate that we must have, and we must also demand the space in times of ever shrinking media opportunities to make that debate. That's why I'd say it's going to be, we need to have many meetings in different parts of the country and of the world to actually to be able to debate these issues. We are now facing a very dangerous time in which you're going to see a huge new right-wing version of economics that is threatening. Your efforts are necessary in the face of a threatening tide of reactions of a new version of extreme individualism that challenges collective welfare, that seeks to exploit and develop war among the poor and the excluded. When you people asking questions in the most widely distributed newspapers say things like, for example, could the tide of anti-capitalism reach the shores of Ireland? And could this Leninism come and threaten us? I mean, you form your own opinion. It's very important that these words are there in all of their ignorance. Your efforts are necessary, therefore. In recent years, countries across Europe have seen a rise in electoral support for political parties declaiming an extreme exclusionary message. Refugees, immigrant communities and other minority groups are increasingly viewed as a threat to the rights of the majority, when there is no evidence whatsoever that such have interfered with the local quintile of occupations, for example in the island next door. You never hear it printed anywhere that 10% of global GDP last year was provided by migrants. But many of those achievements of those who fought tirelessly for human rights are under threat by a new generation of extremists who view those universal rights as a threat to their own individual rights, which they demand to be unregulated, free from any social obligation of a collective kind. They have already, as you know, since the end of the 1980s, been seeking to ever extend a limited role for the state, an ever more extended realm within which unacceptable market forces can flow. The freedom it proposes is a freedom from social responsibility, a freedom to exploit and accumulate without accountability. So ethical societies, of which people like I speak and of, can only grow from ethical communities, and ethical workplaces are a fundamental part of such communities. But unfortunately, the centrality of individualism, of which I speak, has in recent years, has had its own corrosive effect on society. Many workers have been reduced to tradable units of labour in workplaces, which now shape themselves solely around the economic requirements and demands of the employer. Such workplaces refute the concept of decent work based on a holistic understanding of work as a source of personal dignity and freedom, family stability, prosperity in the community, participation in the community, and democratic flourishing. I so often think of Amartya Sen's definition, to be able to participate in your society without shame. The outward manifestations of this chronic job insecurity, so many people on 16-hour commitments, the stretching of the working day beyond contracted and paid hours, the use of technology to erode the lines between work and home, has insidiously and profoundly impoverished the lives of individuals, their families and communities that have been denied the participation and input of so many of their members. Becoming the company person. There's no great difference between Lever Brothers in the 18th and 19th century in the soap factories, which in fact built and owned their workers totally, providing them with every aspect of life. And some of the large companies that tell you if you're feeling stressed, you have a playroom, and you can also go to that machines and these other things. But in the meantime, you are totally owned by that person. That is in itself something that we must be free to discuss, the idea of the total ownership of the person's life. And what must concern us all in terms of its is the threat it represents to democracy itself. It's what we're witnessing across Europe in recent years, a slow and continuous decline in trade union membership when it was so desperately needed, with many younger workers unaware, because they are isolated, that existing rights and such securities as there are were secured as a result of many battles that unions have had to fight. The important benefits they have achieved did not fall from the sky. Those early trade unionists played a major role in building and securing democracy, in their encouraging of debate and their offering of new visions and articulations in the pursuit of fairer and more just societies. And workers that are represented here, workers were not only about an informed kind of slavery, it was also about music and joy and participation and education and reading and all of the aspects of citizenship. And Ireland's tradition of trade unionism is a long and proud one, and there are great iconic moments, such as the great lockout of 1913, which Sabina and I have celebrated here in the grounds of Orson in our tribute to the citizen army. Across the intervening decades, generations of Irish workers have continued to fight to protect the interests of Ireland's working men and women, and of workers abroad. I think of Mary Manning and her colleagues in Dunstores. So many of the benefits and rights that workers and their families enjoy today have been won through the time, energy and effort of union leaders, union representatives and union members who have negotiated and when necessary taken action, often at personal cost, to ensure fairer and better workplaces and societies. And I was reared at a time when I saw trade unions would go out to tedious meetings that were just simply necessary in able to sustain and advance trade unionism. Is gné bonúsacha carcuman gus a soccer an fórteach. As tá sé bhearta go mbeadh na carcuman láide. Agus bhíh lóide cumá in Newcastle with other ship Lucht Oibre. Agus gníomha chun obair cóir beneach dhéanamh a gúine leichéile bhuirmach éasúne san onan ibresa tá céachas ar fud an dam. Trade unionism is really a vital component for a truly participative society. And it is imperative that trade unions be strong, progressive, informed, revolutionary in their adapting to new conditions. And so today, I look to you as a new generation of workers and union activists to continue to take collegiate action in fighting against discrimination in its many forms, in the workplace, in our society, in the street and in the home, and in societies across the globe. And all of you are invited here because you are, as young people, activists who have already demonstrated your commitment to be drivers of change. As Raymond Williams put it, and I so often quoted it, being the arrow, not the target. And by working to create more inclusive, creative workplaces, you've recognised that decent and inclusive rights-bearing workplaces provide a strong base for the creation of decent societies, but that can only be achieved by those with the moral courage, the well-informed views, and insight to work collectively and with respect for dialogue, for full equality and inclusion. You, all of you, more than 150 of you, represent a wide range of unions and groups across all sectors that will be at the forefront of efforts to put human dignity and universal solidarity at the centre of our society. And you may not assume that achieving political independence achieves that. The glimmer of egalitarianism is often a very weak one within the heart of nationalisms. It is a challenge that will encompass the requirement to decarbonise our economy, to halt and reverse the destruction of the natural world, the imperative to welcome all those who have come to our shores in search of safety, security and a better life, the necessity for just and sustainable development. It is a challenge that will determine whether our concept of work will grow and develop into a generous one that encompasses the person, the family and the community. And that is why I'm so pleased that we've been joined by members of the Irish Second Level Students' Union. And I so want to take this opportunity to commend you for all you're doing to enable each and every student to reach their full potential as persons and citizens and realise all of their possibilities. We do not exist solely to make ourselves useful. We have the right to live in the fullest sense. And if we are to achieve the transformations that are now urgently required, and transformation, as I said, is one of the pillars of my second term, we need the engagement of young citizens, unafraid to question the status quo, to reject the easy option of going with the flow, to ask the difficult questions that will change the tenor of a discussion going in the wrong direction, while also valuing the capacity to listen to alternative opinions with respect. It is so important that our younger generation leave formal education equipped with the skills to question and critique decisions made by individuals and institutions in positions of power and authority. ensuring such decisions are ethical and based on fairness. And if in time we have been criticising in the several decades of my own life patriarchy, we also have forms of authoritarianism that we must root out of Irish society, that are stopping creativity and stopping new, relaxed ways of doing things that can better express our humanity. Our schools' curricula reflect the kind of humanity our society seeks and nurtures. The introduction of philosophy into our secondary schools curriculum, that was a most welcome development. But may I suggest yet again, and I repeat it again and again, that fiscal and economic literacy would place citizens in a position to interrogate and examine all the connections between economy, society and the state, to understand how we must adapt our spaces and systems to ensure they enable and support inclusion. An inclusion test, I would think, for example, it's quite reasonable to expect you could have an inclusion test in legislation and a poverty reduction test at home and abroad in a worthwhile aim, in the same way as you could have a test in relation to climate responsibility and enriched sustainability. I'm finishing. I've given a deliberately long speech because you are so important to me at this stage, and I mean it because I see at the time I was both an active politics and the time I was an active trade unionist, and I remain a trade unionist, and I'm still a member. One of the things about it, it is just so important that you win all of these arguments. So on this May Day, let us all commit together to play our part in removing the obstacles that stand between so many of our people and their full participation in society. Come with our father, Oibre was lovely Kayla, Constocky, Club, the Richtene Shaw, go here on it, a Corinor of A. Sulak, the Witmios, with we must resolve to craft and shape a society around the needs of all of our fellow citizens in all their diversity of experiences and perspectives. The challenge of achieving decent work and all it entails will be one of the defining struggles of the coming decades that will unite workers in all generations and all over the world. And all of you here today are the future of the trade union movement, and you will be central in that defining struggle. And I encourage you to use the occasion today in the hours to form new bonds and connections with each other, to learn about the work being done by the different groups among you, and to commit to working in solidarity together, to reclaim an understanding of work as the foundation for the achievement of other human rights and a strong base for a life of dignity and fulfilment and flourishing, and to re-energise the trade union movement and make it strong, make it the most logical place where people begin to actually the test of what is good and valuable legislation. Finally, Marfaka Square, may I thank all those Movikas of all Agot and Akarik, Lynn, on Okai Jaya Group. I want to thank all those who have made today such a special experience, our own staff here in the Oris, and very particularly wonderful entertainers that we've had. Fair Play, which comprises Owen Dignam, fiddle player from Meath, I think Alana Thornburg, Harp from Mayo, Joanne Cusick and the Butler Quarterless, the Civil Defence and First Aiders, but you all look very healthy. And of course, as I said, none of these occasions that we organise in our here in the Oris would not be able to be done if it hadn't been for not just for the generosity and willingness of our staff there, but the absolute, the wonderful way in which they put their enthusiasm into organising and helping us with events like this. Let us celebrate May Day 2019 with a new conviction to make the trade union movement a major partner in policy for all of the decades to come. Really, we just thank you.